Meant to be a celebration of Britain's youngest generation, a controlled royal reception filled with smiling guests, polished speeches, and the promise of continuity. But in seconds, the atmosphere changed. Queen Camilla stepped directly into Princess Charlotte's path, corrected her before the room, and demanded that she return to her assigned place. Charlotte did not lower her eyes. She looked furious. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. St. James's Palace had been prepared for the Commonwealth Youth Reception, a formal gathering connecting young leaders from across the Commonwealth with senior royals. King Charles stood near the center, while Prince William and Catherine watched their daughter prepare for a meaningful duty. Charlotte had been asked to welcome young charity leaders and present a commemorative emblem on behalf of her parents. It was not a grand speech. It was a simple responsibility. Yet for the young princess, it carried trust, pride, and her first real taste of public duty. Camilla moved before anyone expected it. As Charlotte stepped forward, the queen consort raised one hand across her path and told her, within hearing of the guests, that she was not yet senior enough to take that position. She then ordered the girl to stand behind the adult royals. The words landed hard. Conversation stopped. A nearby journalist lowered his pen. Even the youth delegates seemed unsure whether to keep smiling. Charlotte froze for 1 second. Then she answered, "I was invited to speak to them." Her voice remained controlled, but anger sharpened every word. She did not shout. She did not step back. Her jaw tightened, her face reddened, and the silence became heavier than any raised voice. Catherine moved closer at once, placing herself beside her daughter without touching her. William stopped speaking to a courtier and turned fully toward Camilla. The future king said nothing, but his expression changed. He understood the insult, and so did everyone else. Charles watched without intervening. That hesitation made the moment worse. The king's silence gave the correction the force of approval, even if uncertainty had kept him still. No one there could pretend the moment was harmless. Several aides avoided one another's eyes because they already knew Charlotte's role had been disputed before the reception. William approached the event secretary and asked one quiet question: who had changed the program? The answer pointed toward a private instruction issued before the doors opened. Charlotte's fury had shocked the room, but the deeper danger lay in the adults' faces, because this was no longer only about a child's place at one event. Princess Charlotte had spent her young life learning when to smile, when to remain silent, and when to step back. Camilla had spent years fighting to secure her place at the heart of the monarchy. Now those two paths had collided in public. For Charlotte, the humiliation was deeply personal. For the Queen, the moment represented authority. For William and Catherine, it became a warning about who was shaping their daughter's future. Now those two paths had collided in public. For Charlotte, the humiliation was deeply personal. For the Queen, the moment represented authority. For William and Catherine, it became a warning about who was shaping their daughter's future. Charlotte carried a strange burden within the royal family. As the second child of the Prince and Princess of Wales, she did not face the same future waiting for George, yet her growing confidence had made her increasingly important. The Prince of Wales is the title given to the direct heir to the throne, meaning William's family represents the monarchy's next chapter. Every duty given to his daughter therefore carried meaning beyond one ceremony. It showed the public how the younger generation was being prepared. Camilla understood that symbolism better than most. She had fought through years of judgment to stand beside King Charles, and she protected the hierarchy surrounding that position with fierce determination. The Queen believed ceremony created order, yet that instinct had now driven her to challenge a child in front of guests, turning royal rank into a weapon Charlotte could not ignore. Charlotte walked into a private anteroom moments after the exchange, and finally allowed the hurt to show. She looked at Catherine and asked why she had been given a duty if another royal could simply take it away in public. The princess knelt beside her daughter and said she had followed every instruction correctly. But Charlotte shook her head. Remaining silent, she said, would have made Camilla's accusation seem true. Catherine felt the weight behind those words. Her daughter was not angry because she had lost a presentation. She was angry because her honesty had been questioned. The mother promised that the truth would be checked, while the young princess continued holding the commemorative emblem she had never been allowed to present. William found that truth within minutes. Charlotte's official briefing card still clearly listed the welcome and presentation, proving she had followed the approved plan exactly. The future king read the card twice, then asked why a change had been enforced without his knowledge. His concern hardened into anger, because someone had not merely confused the program. Someone had challenged his authority as a father. Camilla gave Charles a different account during a recorded private conversation prepared for the king's household review. She insisted she had acted to prevent confusion over rank, but avoided explaining why she had corrected Charlotte before an audience, speaking quietly. The monarch noticed the omission. Charles later sat alone, turning the unchanged briefing card over in his hand. He now had two accounts, one public wound and a family beginning to divide. The disagreement looked like protocol, but its roots ran deeper. To understand why Camilla acted, the story must return to a private rehearsal, where one sentence turned unease into open conflict. The public confrontation did not begin beneath the chandeliers of St. James's Palace. It began 2 days earlier, inside a closed rehearsal room, where names, positions, and speaking roles were being finalized. Charlotte was not present when Camilla picked up the program, crossed out the young princess's welcome, and delivered an instruction that stunned the event staff. That private decision became the hidden trigger behind everything that followed. Camilla entered the final rehearsal expecting every detail to reflect rank. The royal events secretary stood beside two senior aides, while the master of ceremonial positioning reviewed where each family member would stand. Ceremonial positioning means the formal order that determines who appears where during an official royal event. It may look minor, but it signals power, status, and whose presence carries the greatest weight. Charlotte's assignment had already been approved. The youth delegates had asked to meet someone closer to their own generation, and the young princess had been chosen to welcome them before presenting the commemorative emblem. William and Catherine supported the decision because it gave their daughter a careful, limited responsibility without placing the full burden of royal duty on her shoulders. Camilla read the program in silence. Then she took a pen, drew a hard line through Charlotte's solo welcome, and said, "She stands behind me and speaks only when addressed." The words shocked the room. The queen consort did not raise her voice, but the instruction left no room for discussion. The event secretary hesitated before reminding her that William and Catherine had already approved the role. Camilla answered that allowing Charlotte to move ahead of senior royals would weaken the visible order of precedence. Order of precedence is the official ranking used to decide who takes priority during formal occasions. To her, the issue was not one child's greeting. It was a public test of authority. Catherine learned about the change later that evening, through a documented account delivered by one of the aides who had attended the rehearsal. The princess read the altered program, restored her daughter's original duty, and told the aide that the matter should end there. She believed the correction was clear. She was wrong. Camilla was never formally informed that Catherine had reversed the instruction. One program still showed Charlotte stepping forward. Another placed her behind the adults. Two versions entered the same event, and no one accepted responsibility for resolving the conflict. A senior courtier later recorded in a private household note that the confusion may have been allowed to survive deliberately. Someone wanted the disagreement to erupt in public, where Charles could no longer avoid the growing battle over influence. When Charlotte finally stepped forward, Camilla believed the child was openly defying her. The crossed-out program explained the mistake. But it could not excuse what happened when the queen and the young princess faced each other without ceremony to soften their words. Behind a closed reception room door, the royal smiles disappeared. Camilla entered expecting an apology. Instead, she found Charlotte standing beside Catherine, still holding the emblem she had never been permitted to present. The queen spoke first, warning that public contradiction could never be tolerated inside the monarchy. Charlotte listened without interruption. Then the young princess asked a question so direct that every adult in the room fell silent. Camilla had requested the private meeting because she believed the matter could not be left unresolved. To her, hierarchy meant the formal order that decides who holds greater rank and who takes priority during royal duties. That order mattered because every public gesture sent a message about authority. Yet Catherine refused to leave her daughter alone. She remained beside Charlotte, calm but protective, while the girl held the unused emblem against her chest. William entered moments later, carrying both versions of the reception program. The prince had reviewed the original instructions and already knew his daughter had done nothing wrong. His anger was controlled, but it was unmistakable. He placed the papers on the table and stood between Charlotte and the door, making it clear that the conversation would not end with the child carrying the blame. Camilla looked directly at Charlotte and said, "A princess must learn where she stands." The queen consort expected silence. Instead, the young princess slowly placed the emblem on the table and answered, "Then why was I told to stand somewhere else?" No one moved. Her words were simple, but they exposed the entire contradiction. Catherine spoke before the tension could break. The princess said her daughter had followed the written program exactly, and had responded only after being publicly accused of stepping beyond her place. Camilla called the reply insolent. She insisted that rank had been challenged in front of guests. But the mother did not retreat. She said dignity could not be defended by humiliating a child. William pushed the two programs side by side, gave Charlotte the welcome. The other removed it. The future king asked why Camilla had overruled his child's approved duty without speaking to either parent. His voice remained low, yet every word carried force. The queen finally admitted that she believed Charlotte's growing visibility was being used to create a rival center of public attention around the Wales family. Charles entered in time to hear that admission. The king stopped near the doorway and understood at once that this was not about one greeting. It was about fear. The fear that the future monarchy was beginning to overshadow the present one. Charlotte had spoken with courage far beyond her years. Now Charles had to choose between protecting his wife's authority and defending his granddaughter from public humiliation. Whatever decision he made next would divide the household. King Charles had survived family fractures, public scandal, and years of painful judgment. Yet the briefing cards lying before him created a crisis unlike the others. One carried Camilla's handwritten alteration. The other carried the approval of William and Catherine. Between them stood Charlotte, a granddaughter corrected for following instructions. Charles could defend the Queen's authority, or admit that her actions had crossed a line. Charles held the final power to define royal duties, but the daily decisions were divided between several offices. The royal household is the network of staff responsible for arranging official work, public appearances, and family protocol. That system depended on cooperation. William controlled how his children took part in events, while Camilla expected deference whenever she appeared as the most senior woman beside the king. Camilla met Charles privately before noon. The queen consort sat opposite him and defended her decision without hesitation. He asked why she had not pulled Charlotte aside and corrected the matter quietly. She answered that a private warning would have allowed the challenge to pass unnoticed. To her, silence would have looked like weakness. Charles felt the weight of that answer. The king told his wife that power used against a child did not strengthen the crown. It diminished it. He said the public correction had damaged the dignity she believed she was protecting, because authority without restraint quickly became humiliation. Camilla remained still, but the words cut deeply. The crisis widened when Charles received a documented household request, signed by Camilla's office. It asked for advance approval over future appearances involving Charlotte, George, and Louis. The proposal would have allowed her team to review where the children stood, when they spoke, and which duties they received. William and Catherine had never been consulted. William answered during a private meeting with his father. The prince made his position clear. If Camilla gained control over his children's roles, he would withdraw them from joint engagements. He would not allow Charlotte to be placed in another situation where competing instructions could be used against her. Charles understood what that threat meant. The future king was prepared to remove the younger generation from public events rather than surrender parental authority. Such a break would expose the family's division and weaken the monarchy at the exact moment it needed unity. Charles sat alone after both meetings. He removed his glasses, set down his pen, and looked toward a family photograph. Then the monarch signed a temporary order restoring full control over the children's appearances to William and Catherine. The decision prevented another confrontation. But when Camilla received the order, she did not see a procedural correction. She saw defeat. Charles had chosen protection over pride, yet the paper leaving his desk would strike her harder than any public rebuke. By the following morning, the balance inside the palace had shifted. Camilla's office was removed from decisions involving the Wales children, Charlotte's interrupted presentation was rescheduled, and senior aides were ordered to follow only one approved program. The measures were quiet, but their meaning was unmistakable. She had publicly challenged a young princess, and the monarchy had responded by reducing the very authority she believed she was defending. Charles issued a household directive before breakfast. A household directive is a formal internal order telling royal staff exactly which rules must be followed. This one stated that every duty involving George, Charlotte, or Louis required direct approval from William and Catherine. No separate office could change their roles. No private instruction could overrule their parents again. Camilla received the order while seated alone at Clarence's house. The Queen Consort read the sentence limiting her involvement twice, then pushed the page across the table. She understood what the wording meant. The king had not removed her title, but he had drawn a hard boundary around the future king's children. Camilla called Charles and told him the decision made her appear guilty. She said the palace had accepted William's version without protecting her position. The monarch answered with visible strain. Refusing to correct the damage, he said, would make the entire family appear cruel. Charlotte had followed the approved program, and no child could be sacrificed simply to preserve adult pride. The danger grew within hours. A palace communications officer informed William, through a recorded security briefing, that a nearby broadcast microphone had captured the public exchange clearly. Camilla's warning could be heard. Charlotte's response could be heard. Any attempt to rewrite the moment as confusion would collapse once the recording emerged. William rejected a proposed statement, describing the confrontation as a misunderstanding. The prince said his daughter would not be blamed for an error she had not created. Catherine supported him, insisting that protecting Charlotte meant telling the truth without turning her into a weapon against Camilla. Charlotte returned for the smaller follow-up meeting that afternoon. The youth delegation welcomed her warmly, and she completed the duty that had been taken away. She handed the commemorative emblem to the young representative, received gentle applause, and glanced toward her parents before finally smiling again. Catherine felt relief, but William saw the pain still hiding behind that smile. The ceremony had been repaired. Their daughter's confidence had begun to return. Yet the wound inside the family remained untouched. The palace could rewrite the program, restrict authority, and restore Charlotte's place. But no order could force trust back into the room. Only Camilla and the girl she had embarrassed could decide whether this fracture would become permanent. There were no advisors in the room, no briefing cards, no photographers. Camilla entered expecting Catherine to remain, but Charlotte had asked to speak for herself. For the first time since the reception, The queen and the young princess sat opposite one another, without royal machinery protecting either of them. Camilla began with an explanation about duty. Charlotte interrupted, not angrily this time, but with a truth that made excuses impossible. Catherine had allowed the meeting only because her daughter requested it. The princess understood that royal machinery meant the network of aides, rules, offices, and formal protections that usually stood between family members during conflict. This time, none of it would be present. Charlotte wanted Camilla to hear what the confrontation had done, without anyone softening her words. William remained nearby, but the prince agreed that no courtiers or advisors would enter. He had spent days defending his daughter, yet he knew this moment could not belong to him. Catherine also stepped away after reminding Charlotte that she could end the conversation whenever she wished. Their absence removed the hierarchy that had shaped every earlier exchange. Charlotte looked directly at Camilla and said being corrected was not what had hurt most. The young princess could accept a mistake. What she could not accept was being made to look dishonest before the youth delegates. She had promised to welcome them, followed the written instructions, and then been treated as though she had forced herself forward. Camilla tried to answer with ceremony and rank, but the words sounded weaker in the quiet room. The queen consort finally admitted that fear had guided her. She had watched Charlotte step forward and felt her own position becoming smaller as the Wales family gained more attention. The confession changed everything because it came without blame. Camilla then described warnings delivered through recorded staff briefings from her private office. Those advisors had repeatedly told her that public focus was moving away from Charles's reign and toward William, Catherine, and their children. The Queen had begun to see every prominent moment involving Charlotte as evidence that the present monarchy was being replaced before it was ready. Charlotte answered with painful simplicity. She had never wanted Camilla's position. She had only wanted to keep the promise made to the young delegates. The girl's words stripped the conflict of politics and exposed the fear beneath it. Camilla reached into her handbag and removed the altered program. She tore it once through the handwritten instruction, then apologized without defending her behavior. Charlotte did not smile, but she accepted the apology. In private, the anger finally broke. In public, however, the judgment was only beginning, because the nation had already heard enough to demand the truth. The microphone recording reached the public before the palace could settle on a statement. Millions heard Camilla tell Charlotte she was not senior enough to step forward. They also heard the young princess reply that she had been invited. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it carried generations of royal tension. The established queen defending her position, the future king's daughter refusing to accept blame, and a family dispute suddenly belonging to everyone. Broadcasters replayed the exchange throughout the evening. Royal commentators compared the two competing programs and examined the palace's revised instructions. A royal commentator is a journalist who explains the meaning of royal decisions, traditions, and public actions. This time, their focus was brutal. One side defended hierarchy and argued that Camilla had protected formal order. The other believed she had used rank against a child who had simply followed directions. Catherine watched the first report beside Charlotte. The princess remained calm until the discussion shifted from the altered program to her daughter's expression. Commentators began describing the girl's tightened jaw, her silence, and the anger in her reply. Catherine switched off the television immediately. She would not allow strangers to turn Charlotte's pain into entertainment while the wound was still fresh. Charlotte said little after the screen went dark. The young princess understood that millions had now heard the moment she wanted to forget. Yet Catherine reminded her that the recording also proved she had told the truth. That mattered, because public doubt had been the source of her deepest humiliation. Camilla faced a harsher reality. The queen consort watched herself described as threatened by a young princess, and realized silence would allow that judgment to harden. Her private apology had changed the room with Charlotte, but the public knew nothing about it. Without an official account, fear would become the only explanation anyone remembered. The next morning, a major newspaper carried Charlotte across its front page beneath the headline, "The Princess Who Would Not Step Back." Outside St. James's Palace, a small crowd gathered with handwritten signs. One young girl held a card that read, "You did your duty." The image spread faster than any palace statement. Charles approved a formal response before midday. The palace confirmed that Charlotte had followed her approved instructions, and that Camilla had personally apologized for confronting her publicly. The statement did not erase the pain, but it placed responsibility where it belonged. The public had delivered its judgment. Now the final verdict would depend on what Charlotte and Camilla chose to do after the noise disappeared. The confrontation began with a hand raised to stop a young princess. It ended with the monarchy being forced to face a deeper truth. Rank could decide where Charlotte stood during a ceremony, but it could not decide whether she deserved dignity. Camilla had tried to protect authority through public correction, and nearly weakened it instead. Charlotte had answered without losing her composure, and changed how the palace would treat its youngest members. Charlotte arrived at the next joint family engagement, knowing every detail had been settled in advance. One unified program had been distributed to every royal office, meaning each household received the same approved order of duties. That mattered, because no private alteration could now be used to challenge her place. William and Catherine had approved the role together, and Charles had permanently confirmed that only the parents would decide how their children took part in official events. Camilla approached Charlotte before the youth greeting began. The Queen Consort did not offer another explanation. She simply asked whether the young princess was ready to lead the welcome, then stepped aside without hesitation. The gesture was small, but its meaning was clear. This time, she would not stand in the girl's path. Charlotte did not celebrate the retreat. She did not answer with anger or attempt to embarrass Camilla before the family. The young princess thanked her, moved forward, and completed the greeting with calm confidence. William watched his daughter reclaim the duty without bitterness, while Catherine saw something even more important. Charlotte had protected her dignity without allowing the confrontation to harden her heart. Charles made the consequences permanent. Camilla kept her formal position beside the king, but she lost any independent authority over the public roles of George, Charlotte, and Louis. The monarch understood why that boundary mattered. The future of the crown could not be built by forcing younger royals into silence merely to reassure those holding power in the present. Charlotte and Camilla left the reception room together after the event. There was no dramatic embrace, and no false display of closeness. The Queen held the door. The girl paused, thanked her, and walked beside her without hostility. That quiet moment carried more weight than any public statement. Charlotte's fury was never remembered as childish rebellion. It became the moment she defended her honesty,